Hello, everyone. I'm here today to talk to you about serverless telecommunications. My name is Camarate, and I'm the CTO at GoContact. So let's start by trying to define what is serverless. Main concepts around serverless is that you don't have to manage your servers. You upload your code into a third-party architecture, basically. It kind of scales magically, so you don't have to worry about load balancing or failover, since all that complexity will be managed by the provider of the serverless or as a service platform. Price also scales, of course, as if you start using it more intensively, yes, you're going to pay more. So the main providers around serverless are AWS, Azure, and Google Cloud. AWS was kind of the pioneer on this, as they offered their Lambda solution. And also, a lot of things that you see as a service, like CPaaS, like Twilio, also fit into this category of serverless, because actually you're running code without actually managing the servers. So what are the main challenges for telecoms around serverless? So the main challenge that I find, being an open source guy, is the lack of control. So you have little control over the stack that you're running when you're running a serverless architecture. So basically you can decide pretty much what coding language you want to use. You don't even have the possibility of choosing any coding language. But you can choose from among the most popular coding languages. But that's it, right? So that's what you get. And most serverless platforms actually force you to expose HTTP functions. Okay, so that brings me to the next point, that is flexibility. So with serverless, you won't get much flexibility. So you only have at your disposal wherever is implemented in that specific platform, right? So the flexibility that you have by running your own systems, it's not there with serverless. Also, you're probably gonna face some real vendor lock-in. Even if you're writing like generic code that you could run on your own server or VM or container, there are still some specific things that you're gonna do for specific platforms. If you're running on, let's say, Google Cloud or AWS, you're going to do specific things for that platform that will drive you into a vendor lock-in. And cost might be a challenge, right? So if you're going to scale very quickly, if you don't have time to consider all of the aspects of your architecture, cost might really be an issue here, right? But on the other hand, you have to think that you won't invest as much in maintaining and running your servers, as you have no possibility of involving yourself with that aspect of the architecture. So what is the status quo today around telecoms? So the current state of affairs is that CPaaS, who is actually driving the change in telecoms, is like a halfway to serverless, right? So usually what we are accustomed to do is we host our own telecommunications platforms, and we write our own code against it. If you're writing an app that takes advantage of telecommunications infrastructure, with CPaaS, you already get a bit of serverless, right? So you're writing your code. Your code is executing third-party functions, usually HTTP functions. So it's like halfway to serverless, but that's not the full picture, right? But right now, Twilio just launched a new platform which they call Twilio Runtime, that is actually a serverless infrastructure, right? So what you can do now is you can use Twilio's SDKs or APIs and run your code inside Twilio Runtime as well. So you will have no outside infrastructure. You will run everything inside Twilio's domain. Let's call it this way. So this is like a step further into fully serverless telecommunications. we can't forget that the container revolution is still underway, right? So most of the apps these days are still trying to migrate away from dedicated hardware into containers. And this is actually fairly new, like, 5 years max, that you actually have this big movement around containerization. And telecom is actually stuck in that in the dedicated hardware era. Most of what we run today in production is either dedicated hardware or VMs, right? So it's still a challenge to move your telecom stack into containers. So thinking about serverless is like a step further away, right? So who is actually driving the change? So today, CPaaS is driving the change in telecom. So most of what we see around innovation in telecommunications is around the bringing telecommunications to cloud, right? So it's CPaaS is kind of interfacing between two different worlds, the web world and the telecommunications world. So I like to think of CPaaS as putting an HTTP layer in front of telecommunications. So one thing that is very interesting is that actually CPaaS is bound to monthly active users, right? This is their primary metric of success. It's not revenue, it's not profit, it's monthly active users. And those monthly active users around CPaaS are web developers. So if you're going to look at the demographics around who's doing code for CPaaS, who is using the platforms like Twilio, it's mostly web developers. You can't actually see any telecom guys around this. So who is actually driving the change? In my opinion, web developers are behind this push for using CPaaS. And since CPaaS is actually driving the change in telecoms, we see that telecoms is being defined by web developers. So right now, web developers are pushing for containers, like Docker. Web developers don't like to mess around with IT or DevOps stuff. They are mostly focused on developing code, of course. And they will be pushing for serverless in the future, And if you want to stay attractive as a company to developers, right now you need to be advertising that you're working with like microservices and Docker, etc. But maybe in 2 years' time, you will be forced to be working with serverless just to be able to hire new developers, right? So looking forward. It's still early in the as-a-service revolution. We listen every day to as-a-service, this as-a-service, that as-a-service, and now serverless. That's like its own special flavor. But we need to understand that, as technology companies, we either adapt or die. There's no other way around it, right? So yes, you can stay locked in the past for a couple of years, but soon you will find that you don't have the capability to attract new developers, and that means that in the long run you're probably going to die. Telecoms is ready to be disrupted. In my opinion, it's been a fairly static business up so far, very regulated. It doesn't move very fast. Of course, it does have advantages of being static because it means it works all the time, it's reliable, but it also means that it's ready to be disrupted, right? So what's happening now with CPaaS is just a drop in the ocean because the total market size for telecoms is so huge, and CPaaS is still very, very small. But in my opinion, it's going to grow exponentially. And this leads me to think that we need an open source telecom project that can take advantage of the HTTP3 cloud architecture. You should actually check out RIP. It's RFC that is being drafted to address real-time communications over HTTP3 using UDP streams, forgetting about SIP, forgetting about RTP. This is a different mindset, but it's a conversation that we need to have as a community to move forward into this new cloud environment, okay? So this is a very, very short and overview around my thoughts on serverless. I did write an in-depth article. It's posted on Medium, so you can just search Medium for serverless telecommunications. I'm sure you're going to find it, and you can deep dive into my ideas around this topic. If you want to reach out, just send me an email. I'll be glad to answer any questions or start a conversation. Thank you very much, everyone.